They said it rolled in overnight, but Cal Morris knew better. He'd been awake since 3:11 a.m., same as every night since the divorce, and he'd seen it creep in with his own eyes. It started from the ocean. A pale wall, slow and thick, crawling silently across the waves like it had weight. Purpose. By the time the town stirred awake, it had already swallowed the docks, the beach, the first row of houses. Cars and driveways had gone soft around the edges. Street signs faded into smudges. And no one cared. Just fog, people said. We live on the coast. Sure, it came early this year. A few weeks ahead of schedule. Maybe a little heavier than usual. But weather's weather. Except it didn't feel like weather. Cal stood on the edge of his porch that morning with a cigarette burning down to the filter, watching the way it clung to the trees. Not around them, to them. Like it was tasting the bark. It wasn't moving like normal fog either. Fog drifts. This crawled. And out on the street, as the first kids walked toward the school bus, Cal swore he saw a shape standing just beyond the stop sign. Tall. Still. Something that looked back at him even without a face. By the time he blinked, it was gone. But the cigarette had burned his fingers. By the second night, the fog hadn't lifted. It hung over the town like wet wool, thick, clinging, and suffocating. The sun never made it through. Noon looked like dusk. Dusk looked like the end of the world. Cal wasn't the only one who noticed something was wrong anymore. People started talking. Quietly, at first. About voices. I heard my brother, said Marla from the diner. But he died last winter. A fisherman swore his radio crackled on in the middle of the night, and his own voice whispered through it. Come outside. Kids said they heard their mothers calling from the fog, even when their mothers were asleep down the hall. Cal kept to himself, mostly. But he couldn't ignore what happened to Mr. Lundy, the widower across the street. It was around 4 a.m. Cal had been staring out the window again, watching the mist coil around the power lines like vines, when he saw Lundy step outside in nothing but slippers and a robe. He was moving slowly. Almost hypnotized. He turned to face the fog like it was speaking to him. Then he said, Maria? Soft. Like a child. He stepped forward once. Twice. And vanished. Not behind a bush. Not behind a tree. He simply wasn't there anymore. Cal threw on a jacket and rushed out, yelling his name. Nothing. The only sound was the low, damp hush of the fog folding back in. By morning, the sidewalk was dry. And Mr. Lundy's porch light was still on. But no one ever saw him again. By day 4, it was official. The fog wasn't going anywhere. The weatherman on the old local radio station stuttered through the same message every hour. Unusual marine layer, visibility still low, expected to clear by noon. But noon came and went, and the sun never broke through. Shadows had vanished from the town. No sharp lines. No warmth. Just gray on gray. People moved slower now, heads down, voices hushed. Even the birds had stopped. At Cal's bait shop, business dried up overnight. Boats were docked and stayed that way. No one wanted to go near the water. Even the water looked different now, darker, like something was swimming just beneath the surface. And at night? Things got worse. The fog thickened until you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Streetlights glowed like dying stars, faint, weak, useless. It wasn't just outside anymore. People started complaining it was inside their homes. They swore the mist crept under their doors, through their vents. One woman in town swore she woke up to find a film of fog floating above her bed, like a second ceiling, pulsing with breath. By then, most people just stopped going out. Shops closed. Deliveries stopped. The post office was abandoned. The police station dark. And every morning, Cal noticed something strange. His reflection in the bathroom mirror looked more tired than he felt. Not just exhausted. Different. Like something was watching from behind his own eyes. The next morning, Cal stepped outside and nearly slipped. The fog was thicker than ever, dense like cotton, But it wasn't the moisture that startled him. It was what he saw on the porch. Footprints. Long ones. But not boots. Not shoes. Not even bare feet. Each print had too many toes. The arch was too wide. And they didn't press down into the wood like normal weight, they scraped. Like claws. Dragging. One set led up to his door. Another, away. He hadn't heard anything the night before. Not a knock. Not a creak. But something had stood right outside his house. Watching. He followed the tracks off the porch and into the street. The fog swallowed everything 10 feet ahead, but the prints continued, curving around fences, up driveways, across parked cars. That was the worst part. They went over things. Across the hoods of vehicles. Along rooftops. Like whatever left them didn't care about gravity or noise. And he wasn't the only one seeing them now. Marla called in a panic, saying something had scratched along her siding in the night. Others found prints inside their homes. Down hallways. Across kitchen tiles. Wet marks on ceilings. No one reported a break-in. No one heard glass shatter or locks break. But the marks were always the same. Like something walking and pulling something heavier behind it. That night, Cal didn't sleep. He sat by the window, shotgun across his lap, waiting. And just before dawn, he saw them again. Shapes, tall, crooked silhouettes, moving inside the fog. Not walking. Hunting. 3 days after Mr. Lundy vanished, he came back. Walked straight up to his porch like nothing had happened. Wearing the same slippers, the same robe, even the same blank look on his face. Cal watched from across the street. At first, he was relieved. Then he noticed it. Mr. Lundy didn't blink. Not once in the 10 minutes he stood there fumbling with his front door key. Later, when Marla visited him with soup and 1,000 questions, he just stared at her. Didn't speak. Didn't smile. Just slowly closed the door in her face. Other returnees started appearing too. The missing mailman. A teenage girl who vanished from her backyard. Even a dog, Old Duke, showed up one morning, muddy and stiff, tail unmoving. They all came back. But they weren't back. They walked the streets at night, silently. Eyes glassy. Skin damp. Their movements just a little too slow, like they were figuring out how to be human again. And sometimes, only sometimes, Cal would see one of them talking to someone who wasn't there. Mouthing words. Tilting their heads like they were listening to something inside the fog. One night, Cal caught Lundy standing in the middle of the road at 3:07 a.m., staring into the mist. Murmuring. Then smiling. Not a warm smile. A stretched, sick, unnatural one. And Cal swore, right as Lundy turned his head, his eyes weren't just reflecting the fog's glow. They were glowing back. It started with static. Cal's radio, an old dial-tune model he kept by the kitchen, crackled to life one night around 2:30 a.m. No music. No broadcast. Just a soft, broken hiss. He turned the volume down. It didn't change. Turned it off completely. The static kept going. Then came the breathing. Not deep or angry. Just slow, wet, close. Like someone was standing on the other side of the speaker. Listening. Waiting. He yanked the plug from the wall. The static stopped. But not for long. The next morning, his phone buzzed, even with no service. One notification, voice memo saved. He hadn't recorded anything. When he played it, he heard his own voice whisper. Let it in. He dropped the phone like it burned him. Around town, others experienced the same. Radios turning on in the middle of the night. Static-filled voicemails from disconnected numbers. Phone screens lighting up with messages no one typed. We see you. It remembers. Almost time. And then came the camera glitches. Security footage pointed at fog-filled streets would flicker, then freeze. But only for a second. When it resumed, the shape would be closer. Closer than it should have been. Like it knew it was being watched. And in one recording from the grocery store lot, a figure walked up to the lens, paused, and leaned in. The face was blurry. Stretched. Wrong. But unmistakable. It was Cal. Watching himself. Smiling. By now, most of the town had stopped pretending things were normal. Windows were boarded. Doors sealed with duct tape and old towels. Some folks burned sage. Others just prayed. But it didn't matter. The fog had stopped waiting outside. It started appearing inside homes, first in corners, then closets, then bedrooms. You'd wake up choking on it, that damp, mildewy cold sitting in your lungs like a second breath you didn't want. Cal woke one night to find a line of condensation running down the inside of his mirror. Like someone had leaned over it and breathed. He kept every vent sealed, every crack stuffed. Still, it came. Sometimes as a slow curl under the door. Sometimes in his mouth. He woke gagging, coughing up fog like smoke from a bad dream. The people who had returned, the ones who weren't quite right, they started showing up outside houses. Knocking softly. Not saying a word. Standing for hours. Smiling. Waiting. One night, Cal heard the knock. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. But the fog had already started pouring in under the floorboards. He rushed to the attic, flashlight in one hand, shotgun in the other. And when he reached the top step, the fog was already there. Hovering. Breathing. And in the center of it stood him. Not quite him. Taller. Wrong. The eyes were hollow, like someone had scooped them out and filled them with smoke and memory. It smiled with too many teeth. Then whispered, "It's warmer when you stop fighting." The next morning, someone snapped. It was Leo, the school janitor. Quiet guy. Always wore the same brown coat. He burst into the center of town yelling, "It's the fog or us! We're not dying here!" He rallied 5 others. Cal watched them pack a van with jugs of water, canned food, and maps torn from the library. They jammed towels under every door seam, duct-taped the vents, even wrapped the van's air intake with mesh. They left just before noon. For hours, the town waited. Some stood on their porches. Others peered out second-story windows. Cal stayed in his attic, staring into the white nothingness beyond the trees. And then, just after sunset, the van returned. But no headlights. No engine sound. It rolled silently down Main Street like it had been pushed by something not quite wind. It came to a stop outside the bait shop. Driver's door open. Interior lights on. Empty. Cal approached slowly, shotgun in hand. The inside of the van was covered in moisture. Like it had rained inside. On the passenger seat was a photograph, burned around the edges. A picture of the 6 who left, standing together. But all their faces were missing. Just smeared holes. No bodies were ever found. The next day, the ferry station was gone. Not closed. Not locked. Gone. Like it had never existed. Roads now curled and looped back into town. Signs spun. Compass needles twitched like they were in a dream. No one tried to leave again. Some stopped talking. Some stopped eating. Most just stared at the fog and waited. Because they finally understood. They weren't supposed to leave. By the second week, the town had gone completely silent. No engines. No laughter. No birds. Just fog. Thick. Constant. Breathing. Cal stopped checking the time. The clocks had started spinning, ticking backward or freezing mid-second like they were remembering instead of measuring. He stayed in his attic most days. Watching. Sometimes he saw shapes. Not people. Not quite. Too tall. Too smooth. Like silhouettes sculpted from breath and memory. They didn't walk. They floated. And every now and then, they would stop in front of a window. Not move. Not blink. Just look. And if you stared too long? They smiled. He found a tape recorder one day in a drawer. Old, dusty. He hit record. Not because he thought anyone would hear it, but because he needed to confess something. It's not fog. It's not weather. It's something else. Something alive. It learns you. Talks to you in the voices you miss most. And when it knows you, it takes your shape. But it doesn't kill you. Not right away. It waits. Wears you. Until no one can tell what's real anymore. Not even you. He paused the recording. Outside, the fog pressed closer to the windows, thicker than ever before. He could feel it now. Inside the walls. Inside his bones. And from downstairs. Footsteps. Not creaking. Not heavy. Just wet. Something was walking through his house. And then, from behind him, soft, calm, familiar. His own voice whispered. Stop recording. You've already said this.